when you pull off a tournament like this where there's no issues on safety, and hopefully there won't be going forward, when the entire tournament is run in a smooth manner. Hopefully the takeaway from this is that Pakistan can host cricket again.
Somebody feels that is a privilege. It's not good for him, because right now I don't feel that all the community is totally on Jannik's side.
I think we realized a few weeks out that the players were going to be really into this. This was a big event for the players, and that kind of got us all psyched to know that we might have something here.
Hello and welcome to This Sporting Planet, your global view of sport. From London, I'm Natalie Sawyer.
From Singapore, I'm Edward Russell.
And from the USA, I'm Todd Harris.
Now, in this episode, we're talking about the ICC Champions Trophy, which is, of course, currently underway in Pakistan. The first time a global tournament has been held there in nearly 3 decades. Plus, we are delving deeper into why Jannik Sinner has been disqualified from tennis for only 3 months, and there is a European Six Nations tournament in Rugby Union as well, plus ice hockey. They've launched a brand new Four Nations ice hockey tournament, which has taken that sports world by storm and reached over 16 million viewers in North America. Todd will be filling us in on all of that.
First, welcome back, Edward, from all of your travels. You've been making us very jealous on the This Sporting Planet WhatsApp group with all of the photos that you've been putting on there, as well as your Instagram account as well. So come on, how was your trip? What was your highlight?
Very nice. Well, you know what? We've been doing This Sporting Planet for a couple of months, and I keep hearing Todd talk about what it's like to watch live American sport in the US, so I felt like I had to experience it for myself. It's all your fault, Todd, that I flew over to New York. But I did watch my very first live NBA match. It was the Knicks versus the Grizzlies at Madison Square Garden, the world's most famous arena. I got to say, that was actually my first time watching any kind of live American sport, and what struck me is just how much of a spectacle it is. Mm-hmm. There are so many stoppages, which I'm aware of when I watch it on TV, but when you're there in the stadium at the Garden, every single stoppage, something happens, whether it's giveaway prizes, they bring out the t-shirt gun, there's cheerleaders, there's games with the fans, you can win a car, and then they do all the fan cams, and they do the kissing cams, and the celebrity cams. It's just, your senses are just inundated by so much going on, to a part where almost I felt like the sport was secondary.
Let's get after it, though. Natalie, you and I both saw Ed didn't have too shabby of tickets, first of all, so that's what the star power does. And how are the concessions, Ed? Did you go all in? Did you get a hot dog? Did you do popcorn?
I did a pint-sized can of Corona, which I've never seen in my life before. So I did that, and actually, as you said, just across from me was the other celebrities, me withstanding. And what a front row it was. I think there was like Timothy Chalamet, Ben Stiller, Adam Sandler, Chris Rock, Dustin Hoffman, of course, the most famous Knicks fan, Spike Lee. It helps that, I guess, New York only has one team, right? I mean, they've got Brooklyn as well, but if you are a New Yorker, that is the team you support. One more thing, actually, it's all new to me, so I would love some explanation from you, Todd. I did notice that there's kind of no distinction between home fans and away fans. In football stadiums, of course, the away fans sit in one corner or one little quadrant, and there's massive fences and barriers up to stop them interacting with the home fans. I mean, at the Garden, I saw a Knicks fan sitting right next to a Grizzly fan. They're all showing their colors. Is that a normal thing?
Well, Edward, we're Americans. Normally, we're civilized until we're not. And so what happens is they'll sit next to each other and they will get along. Usually some pretty good ribbing. It's until someone maybe has too many beverages of those Coronas you talked about, where they maybe start acting a fool and they have to be escorted out, or something breaks out. But I think in basketball, it usually doesn't get that heated because the game is so fluid back and forth. But whatever you're popping your jersey, it shows a little bit of pride and a little bit of bravery to rock into MSG running a Portland Trailblazers jersey or a Memphis Grizzlies jersey.
Well, exactly, yeah, because as Natalie knows, you do not dare to wear away colors in the home section of a Premier League match, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah, we know that for sure. And I mean, it's one of those things where if you are an away fan in the home end and your team happens to score, it's a case of staying sat down and then politely applauding, when the home fans do the right, the home team does the right thing. So, it's a very different kind of setting in football. Different in rugby, though. Rugby, they do mix here in England in the Premiership.
We'll get on to rugby shortly. And actually, you did mention that you are mostly civilized over there in the US, Todd. I mean, I did just watch highlights of a fight breaking out between Team USA and Team Canada in 9 seconds. So I'm not sure how civilized you are. But we'll get on to the NHL a little bit later on as well.
Hey, before we get to the NFL, Natalie, anything for you? Sporting highlights last month?
Oh, good question. Can I talk about my own team, Brentford, who had gone the majority of the first part of the season not winning an away game? Now, 4 games on the spin we've won on the road. It's incredible. And in between that, we had that fantastic 2-2 draw with Manchester City, having been 2-0 down and then scoring in the last 8 minutes to equalise and come away with a draw. So that would be my highlight from a Brentford perspective.
Todd, what about you?
Yeah, Sail GP down in Kate's neck of the woods, New Zealand, and then we had Australia, and then I've been working basketball. The FIBA Euro Cup qualifier has been taking place. That's all wrapped up now, so it's been a lot of fun. But I want to turn our attention, because it's never too early or too late to talk about the Super Bowl, guys. I want to get your reaction. Obviously, Super Bowl taking place. Kansas City was looking for the three-peat. Didn't happen. Philadelphia came in and absolutely dominated the game, so much to the point that I shut it off. I stayed up and watched. At halftime, I was pretty much done with the commercials, the halftime show, everything. It was clearly a Philadelphia game, and they just had a masterful game plan, got it done. Jalen Hurts, who I thought would win the MVP if Philadelphia got it. It was either going to be him or Saquon Barkley, but he did an amazing job. But now the attention turns towards next season, because as we all know, the NFL season is year-round. They are already unveiling their schedule for next year. We're talking about Ireland. We're talking about Spain, first time Dublin, Madrid. And Kate was so excited when they announced they're going to Melbourne, Australia in 2026. The LA Rams will be heading down under. But what was your guys' takeaway from Singapore and England of the Super Bowl? Was it a big success as it was in the States?
Always is over here. It's just growing and growing. We've talked about it many a time, haven't we, on this sporting planet? It's just one of those beasts that's just getting better and better and bigger as well. In fact, one of our British commentators, he went viral for one of the calls that he made during that Super Bowl. It was the Cooper DeJean touchdown. Where that incredible one where he picked off Patrick Mahomes, wasn't it?
On his birthday. He's a rookie.
On his birthday. Exactly that. That one went viral. And that's a British commentator. And so, there's a part of me just thinks, we're coming up behind you, us Brits, and we're getting into this sport. Maybe we're going to take it over. But it's always popular over here.
I was just wondering, Todd, is it good for the sport that the Eagles won and the Chiefs just didn't continue this runaway championships that they continue to win?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question, Edward. I think there was a little bit of a sense of, do we have Kansas City fatigue with the Kelseys and Patrick Mahomes and Taylor Swift mania and all that stuff. And I think people maybe were starting to get a little bit of fatigued on that. And I think Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, the underdog, they haven't won it since 2018. I think there was just a really gravitational pull towards the Eagles as being the team that could beat Kansas City, because Kansas City has the best player in the NFL right now, Patrick Mahomes, no question about it. But as a team, I think the Philadelphia Eagles were the better team, and their roster was a little more talented. And the addition of Saquon Barkley, their defense was a difference maker, and being able to contain Patrick Mahomes, which no one else was able to do the prior 18 weeks. I think that was the big story. But I just think it was a great spectacle. It was too bad that it was a blowout. Fox was telecasting it, broadcasting it in the States, and I think their ratings were still good, but it would have been a lot better. Obviously, it had gone to overtime or it came down to a 1-score finish, but good for Philadelphia, and they celebrated in typical Philadelphia fashion, just went absolutely ballistic the day after or that night.
A few highlights on the Asia sporting front. Congratulations to the USA's Angel Yin, who won the Honda LPGA Thailand event. Now, you might remember Stacey Lewis, I think, on one of the previous episodes telling us that it was one of the marquee events, the LPGA outside of the USA. Well, 72 of the world's best golfers competed there in Thailand for $1.7 million. Yin started the final round with a 5-shot lead and proceeded to card a 7 under 65. So she finished on 28 under par, which is pretty decent. Not surprisingly, a new 72-hole tournament record. That was set in 2022. So it was her second LPGA title. And the next LPGA event, and that's one of the reasons why I brought it up, is happening right here in Singapore this week. Hopefully the weather holds out, because it has been raining every single day. Australia's Hannah Green is the defending champion. And I'm trying to get an interview with some of the ladies who were down here for that event. So many big names here. So stay tuned. Hopefully I can have a chat with a couple of them.
Okay. Well, as you can imagine, in Europe, it's been pretty busy. And this is going to be a pacey roundup.
Okay.
We've got the Six Nations. That has already started. We'll have more on that later. But in Europe, when it comes to the football or the soccer, we are truly underway in terms of this sort of second half of the season. Liverpool are currently 11 points clear. Looks like they're going to run away with it and win this Premier League this season. Bayern Munich, likewise, are 8 points clear of Bayer Leverkusen in the Bundesliga, but it's close in Spain between Barcelona and Real Madrid. Only goal difference separates those two at the top. But Atletico Madrid are just a point behind. And here is a question for you both. Celtic, well, they are top of the Scottish Premiership. They lost last weekend, as did Rangers, their nearest rivals. When was the last time that happened, do you think? Anyone have an idea?
Can't remember it happening anytime recently, that's for sure.
It doesn't tend to happen very often. You've got to go back 7 years for the last time both of those teams lost in the same sort of game week of a league. Celtic lost 2-1 at Hibs, whereas Rangers lost at home to St Mirren, and it led to the sacking of Philippe Clement, the Rangers boss. And now they have turned to their former midfielder and former captain, Barry Ferguson, to take over as the interim manager. He's won 15 titles at the club. So yeah, that is a pretty interesting scenario of what's happened in Scotland.
On the subject of football, actually, because I've pretty much stopped watching the Premier League. It doesn't exist for me anymore after Arsenal have again capitulated. I tell you, every time Liverpool drops some points and Arsenal give you a bit of hope and you think, okay, the title challenge is back on. They go and lose to West Ham. Anyway, moving on. I do have to say, in this part of the world, one of the greatest stories this season has been Kaoru Mitoma. Now, I think it was a couple of seasons ago where he had a real breakout season and then he got injured and he's really just come back and hit his stride again. This season, 7 goals, 3 assists in the Premier League. And he's also now the highest scoring Japanese player in Premier League history. He's moved clear of Shinji Okazaki, that Leicester City striker. But no disrespect to Okazaki, he kind of came off the bench a lot in that Leicester season. Mitoma is one of, if not the stars for Brighton and one of these stars in the Premier League as well. And it's no surprise that he was the subject of a £90 million bid by Al Nassr to sign him in the summer. But what I do love about it, and I think we touched on this when we talked about Shohei Ohtani bringing Japanese attention to baseball, is how much he has just brought Japanese eyes to the Premier League once again. They've obviously had Japanese players in the past. They've had the likes of Inamoto. I mentioned Okazaki as well. But I don't think anybody's really captured the attention as much as Mitoma, because he's just such a fantastic player. He's not a great Japanese player. He's a great footballer. He's got a fantastic goal recently. And I think his the most recent game they played, his touch, when he brought it down off the sky and kind of landed on the sixpence on his boot, was absolutely incredible. And they actually did, and this goes to show just how popular Brighton have become in Japan, how much they know that they have that popularity now. They had a preseason tour there last year, which they probably never would have considered before Mitoma came. So what Son Heung-min has done for South Korea over at Spurs, I feel like Mitoma is doing the same for Japan at Brighton at the moment.
Well, Brighton, of course, looking to get into Europe for next season. They're not that far off the Champions League places as it stands. And talking of that tournament, well, Real Madrid beat Manchester City, which was City's earliest exit for 12 years. Bruges beat Atalanta from Italy, where all 3 of the sides competing in the playoff phase, that's AC Milan, Atalanta and Juventus, all went out, not without plenty of controversies, though, as Theo Hernandez's red card and a public spat between the Atalanta manager, Gian Piero Gasparini, and the Nigerian star player, Ademola Lookman, over a missed penalty. Goodness me, that was drama in itself. The last 16 matches start on the 4th of March, and there are some great matches. There is a German affair between Bayern Munich and Bayer Leverkusen, a Madrid derby between Real and Atletico. It's France versus England between PSG and Liverpool. PSG, by the way, winning their playoff on a 10-0 aggregate against French side Brest. And we also have a rematch of Benfica versus Barcelona. That's a tie that produced 9 goals the last time that they met. And your Arsenal team, Ed, have PSV Eindhoven to look forward to.
Well, yeah, and to rub salt into the wounds, this is an Arsenal side that has no forward and didn't sign anyone in the January transfer window. PSV have just signed the next Arsenal forward, who will probably now score against us in Lucas Perez. So fantastic.
So you're saying there's a chance?
Just a reminder, in between episodes, you can keep up to date with all the global sports news on our social channels and YouTube page, including full-length interviews with all of our guests. Give us a follow, subscribe, and share with all your friends and family.
Yes, please do that. Now, later on in the show, we're going to be finding out why the tennis world number one, Jannik Sinner, has been banned from the editor-in-chief of the world's longest-running tennis magazine, Il Tennis Italiano. We'll head over to Natalie for that interview a little bit later on. But first, let's focus on the ICC Champions Trophy, which is currently underway in Pakistan. It is the 9th edition of the cricket tournament, the first time that Pakistan have hosted a global tournament in nearly 3 decades. The UAE are also hosting matches as a neutral venue for the Indian cricket team. Now, the last ICC Champions Trophy, way back in 2017, Pakistan actually won their first title that year. And as we record this episode, we are about halfway through it. Pakistan have unfortunately been knocked out, but the semi-finals are just around the corner. And to find out what it means for Pakistan and what we can expect from the remaining games, Natalie has been catching up with broadcaster and former cricketer Suhail Chandhok.
I actually really like the ICC Champions Trophy. I've always been a fan of it. I'm one of those, I guess, old school nuffies that like one day cricket. I think there's kind of a balance of all forms of cricket in it. You've got the slam bam part of it through the first bit and the last bit. I think the evolution of ODI cricket has actually been quite fantastic, given the rise of T20 cricket and given the innovation in terms of shot making. So actually, I'm glad that the tournament's back. The fact that it's back in Pakistan is another huge story, of course, in itself. Pakistan hosting an ICC tournament for the first time since 1996, if I'm not wrong. And that's huge for the nation itself. But I think just on the format coming back, look, I think you either have to kill ODI cricket altogether, or you've got to help sustain it with an ICC Champions Trophy, etc., etc. If you're still playing bilateral series, if you've still got an ICC ODI World Cup, then I think the Champions Trophy has a place. And I think I'm glad, therefore, that it's been revived because if you've got the World Cup there, and I think we saw the last World Cup and why it was so special in the ODI format, it's still got legs. So as long as it still has legs, and maybe there's a reduced number of ODIs that are played through the year, but I think an ICC tournament of this stature, it's good to have it back.
With the World Cup, that lasts, just around 2 months, something like this, whereas this tournament condensed into 2.5 weeks. It's, I think, 5 games you have to play if you're going to go on and win it. It's a tournament that leaves very little for error, Suhail.
It is, and that's kind of what I like about it. One game, one bad game, you're out pretty much. And I think we've seen that, unfortunately, for you guys in England. Australia turned up with half a squad and still beat an English side that's kind of been patchy. And, everyone writes Australia off before an ICC event, but then we forget that at an ICC event, Australia just somehow find a way to turn up. It's one of those things about Aussie cricket that just is so hard to explain. And I actually caught up with Shane Watson here a couple of days ago, and I asked him, and he said, look, I think there's something that mentally just switches on within us as Aussies. And they have this sort of switch that goes off when an ICC big ticket event turns up, where they know how to sort of hit that next gear mentally. And it's almost as if they feed off that pressure as well. I mean, chasing in excess of 300 was an unbelievable chase for what was pretty much a half-baked Aussie squad, especially in terms of the bowling. So, kudos to them. And it is an unforgiving format. Pakistan as hosts know that now, and I think they've had a couple of shocking results. So they're pretty much out of contention at home. And that, to me, is the saddest tale of them all in some sense.
Tell us, you mentioned about Pakistan hosting an ICC tournament for, nearly 3 decades, the first time they've done that. How important is it for Pakistan then to be hosting a world event like this?
I think it's massive. I've got friends of mine that studied with me in university in Australia that are in Pakistan now, and other cricketers that are in Pakistan that talk about the stature of this tournament. I don't mean stature from the tournament itself or the infrastructure and all of that jazz that came together last minute, but just the implication on tourism, just the implication on just the outward sort of look into Pakistan, right? I think the safety issues, commercials, all of this, the entire implication on Pakistan is so different from the outside world in. And I think when you pull off a tournament like this, where there's no issues on safety, and hopefully there won't be going forward, when the entire tournament is run in a smooth manner, hopefully the takeaway from this is that Pakistan can host cricket again. At the end of the day, people love watching cricket there. When you saw Glenn Maxwell, hit those winning runs of Jofra Archer, you had 35,000 people screaming. And I think that's what you want to see in the subcontinent. You get that flavor of love for sport and for cricket in Pakistan. So, you think back to India's last series there, and I remember Lakshmipati Balaji and that entire touring party becoming icons in a different nation. And there's so many implications of a good tournament for Pakistan, on the democracy, on the politics of it, on the commercialization of sport again, on the revival of sport in many ways, to be able to host cricketing bilaterals or other tournaments yet again. So I think the implications are far greater than what any of us could ever imagine, because there's been such a cloud over Pakistan. And, unfortunately, for some reason, they can't shy away from it. And, that's why I think obviously tensions remain between India and Pakistan, and India doesn't play there. But I think this will help, right? It's a step in the correct direction. It's a step towards, hopefully, maybe India touring there in some point in the future. But I think there has to be more conviction for touring parties, for players to feel safe about it. And it only goes, with every tournament that's run successfully, to build that confidence for a player, for an administrator, for everyone concerned.
And as ever, if you want to hear more from Suhail, including whether India are in a better place than the turmoil they were in at the beginning of this year when we last spoke to him, you can head over to our YouTube channel. So the Champions Trophy, well and truly underway, and it's looking good for India as things stand, not so good for the host Pakistan, who pretty much have been eliminated now after their 2 defeats at the time of recording this podcast. But it's a trophy that has been welcomed back onto the ICC cricketing calendar, having been without it since 2017. I think one of the reasons they got rid of it, Ed, was because they felt as though they wanted 3 flagship events across all formats. So you've got your T20 World Cup, the World Test Championship, the Cricket World Cup as well. But there's obviously been a pull to get more 50-over cricket back on the calendar.
Yeah, I mean, I've really enjoyed watching it. Obviously, it's easy for us to say it because we don't have to play in it. So all these players are saying there's too much cricket. As fans, we're like, hey, bring it on. I love watching as much cricket as possible. But I do agree that there is a place for it. I was very worried that, 8 years on since that last one in the UK, that maybe we wouldn't see the ICC Champions Trophy again. But it does fill a gap, doesn't it? In a year where there is no other kind of big ticket cricketing event. The next year, I think 2026 has the T20 World Cup, and then the ODI World Cup is in 2027. So, if it weren't for the Champions Trophy this year, nothing else really would be happening in terms of a big major cricketing tournament. And also, of course, India's refusal to play Pakistan in the non-ICC events means that if you do want to watch those 2 rivals go at it and see some fantastic competition, although it wasn't too much of a competition when they played in the Champions Trophy recently, you kind of have to have these events. And hey, the more opportunities we get to watch 2 of the most fervent cricket nations in the world, I'll take it.
Can I ask a general question for you 2 guys? What do you think the state of the state is when it comes to the sport of cricket? You guys come from cricketing nations where the sport has been. Is it in a good place right now? Is it being pushed out? Do they have the coverage that they deserve? Are they getting paid? Or is this just a smaller sport that's never going to be on the grand stage?
Oh, good question. I think it'll always have its place because, from an England perspective, for example, we've got our England Barmy Army. They travel across the world to support England. And cricket has a big following, especially the international cricket. Domestic cricket, that's a harder one to really lure the fans in. We've got our county championship here in England. My goodness, it's sometimes one man and his dog who's watching it, unfortunately. That's the biggest issue that those county championship sides have. But I think international cricket over here sells out pretty much every time. It doesn't even matter who the opposition is. There is that appetite for it. The one issue you might have, and maybe this is again why they brought back the Champions Trophy, is that there was a fear of the demise of the 50-over cricket format, because T20 has just taken off, as we know, with all the respective domestic leagues now. Test cricket, yes, there is always a fear with Test cricket that could die out, because do people really have the stamina for 5 days? Test cricket itself is shortening anyway. You don't tend to see Test matches go to 5 days, but I think again, Test match cricket will always have its appeal. So I think there was a need to bring back that Champions Trophy, like you said, Ed, there, because one, we have no international tournament this summer, or this year, I should say, but it's that 50-over format that maybe just needs that little bit of a pick-me-up.
Yeah, and there's a special craft, isn't there, to 50 over matches? T20 is pretty much just blast it. I mean, to be fair, the 50 overs ahead in that way as well. But there, you do get that period where the spinners come into play and each bowler gets a maximum of 10 overs. So, they can really work their spell a lot better than they can in T20, where they only get 4 overs each. I do think one problem with cricket, but this is a problem that has just endured for so long and it happens in major tournaments, is, as you said, I think, in your interview with Suhail, Natalie, there is very little room for error, whether that's an error in a result or an error in the weather as well. And we just saw the South Africa-Australia game get washed out, and there are no backup days. And we've seen this in previous major tournaments as well. The fact that the rain washed out a game can have massive implications across the entire group through no fault of any team.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest issues. You're right. When you've got such a short tournament that you've got to come up with your solutions, whether it's those rain affected matches and you get points for that for different reasons. That's the shame about it, that it's such a condensed tournament. I think the original reason, though, they brought up the Champions Trophy, because they've always had the World Cup. They've had that for decades, but it was actually brought up to try and infiltrate cricket into emerging territories, shall we say. I think they tried it in Kenya, they tried it in Bangladesh, for example, but unfortunately they didn't really have the support that it wanted, and they maybe didn't get enough fans coming to those particular tournaments. And then the bigger nations just kind of weighed in, as they always do, and just thought, we'll take over this one as well. So I think since 2004, that's why you've seen some of these bigger nations. But I say that, you've got Afghanistan here in the Champions Trophy, who are an emerging nation when it comes to cricket, especially in the white ball cricket. So it does give a chance, an opportunity for other nations to get in and perhaps ply their trade and compete against the very best.
And one of the reasons why I asked that question, guys, is potentially, if you believe the reports, that there's some massive infusion of money possibly coming, investments coming, as people see this as the next burgeoning market. So I wanted to get the experts' point of view.
Now, coming up a little bit later, I know Todd has got some news of a brand new ice hockey tournament that has taken North America by storm. But first, let's bring you some tennis and one of the surprise stories from the last week or so. The men's world number one, Jannik Sinner, has been banned for 3 months, starting immediately after reaching a settlement with the World Anti-Doping Agency, or WADA, over his 2 positive drugs tests from last year. It's a case that has divided the tennis world, but WADA accepted that the Italian was inadvertently contaminated and did not intend to cheat. It's a complicated story, as you can imagine, and that's why I enlisted the help of editor-in-chief of the oldest tennis magazine in the world, Il Tennis Italiano, Stefano Semeraro, to help us understand what exactly has been going on. He told me it's a complicated story. It's actually part of the reason there's been this backlash against Sinner.
All the story has been managed in a not so transparent way. For if you're a normal guy who is not so into the matter and into the details and the technical, it's not easy to understand.
Yeah.
But I did ask to the agency if they can say why they took this decision to reach an agreement, and James Fitzgerald, who is the media chief of the agency, told me it's not something new, because there is a point in the rules. Then you can apply a code, a comma, that it says that under special circumstances you can reach an agreement, because they understand that Jannik doesn't want to cheat, but they have to save the principle of the responsibility.
Novak Djokovic has sort of alluded to, hasn't he? Suggesting that if you have access to the top lawyers, then you can argue your case, as Sinner may have done so in this particular situation, whereas others haven't been able to do that. And it's a case of the have and the have-nots, isn't it? At the end,
like in life.
Oh, absolutely. But it does make sense that really that someone like Novak Djokovic, who is such a big figurehead in tennis, is speaking up and saying it needs to be a fairer playing field.
Yeah, I agree with Novak. I was in Doha. I did ask him the question if I think there is another point to investigate. Is more important to the privacy of the players, of the transparency of the rules. And he said, I have no a real answer. We have to discuss that. We have to reach a point. And he said, I cannot say is the privacy is more important than the transparency of the rules at this point. But this is surely a point that we have to discuss. Otherwise, everything going individual. Every case stays by its own, and then you don't have a general rule, which is not good for tennis, for sports, and for all the athletes that are involved.
Do you think he will be forever tainted, or is tennis a forgiving sport?
I don't know. I think here in Italy, as I said before, it's still popular. The TV, the commercials are still flowing, so I don't see any major impact on his figure, public personality. If you talk about tennis in general, I don't know, because I felt that there is no such an empathy for Jannik from the ambience, from the milieu of tennis. Many athletes say have doubt, and they say not so emphatic comments. So maybe there is something that we have to wait and see, because maybe at the beginning of the Italian Open, we will see what's going on, how he'll be welcomed from the community, because somebody, as you said before, somebody feel that is a privilege, that is the fortunate son of the tennis, and this is not. It's not good for him, because right now I don't feel that all the community is totally on Jannik's side.
No.
Even if Jannik is a very good guy, he's not a controversial, he's not a Nick Kyrgios, he's not somebody can make this discuss. So if you remember the Australian Open, when he was very, very, very nice to Zverev that lost the final. They were, hugging. So he's a very nice guy, but suddenly there is a shadow hanging over him. So.
And I've seen the front cover of your Il Tennis Italiano magazine, Jannik front and center. What's the sort of story behind this? Is the magazine just backing him to come good eventually, like once he's back from his ban? Not eventually, because he's very good.
We are trying to understand which is the headlines is the future of Jannik. So I think he can leave this all this story on his back, and then go further. We are trying to investigate if he has a chance to win the Grand Slam, because of the length of the ban was very, very clever, let's say this. So there is no major. I mean, two 1,000 tournament will be missed, but then the Italian Open and the Grand Slams are safe. So he's the Australian champion, and so maybe he has a shot to complete the Grand Slam, and so we are trying to investigate if it's possible. I think is not easy. It's probably the most difficult task in tennis to complete the Grand Slam. We saw a few years ago Djokovic face in the very last leg of his journey, but then maybe because the competition is not so strong like in the last 15 years. We used to have Federer, Djokovic, Nadal, and Wawrinka, and other great players. Now maybe there is Alcaraz, there is still Djokovic, but he's older. Alcaraz has a lot of ups and downs. So probably if he's at the top of his condition, he has one chance to do it. The very difficult part for him is the clay, I think, less than the grass. So we are trying to understand what's going on, if he has a chance, and at the end of the story, that we like to think that he has a chance.
Thank you again to La Stampa journalist and editor-in-chief of Il Tennis Italiano, Stefano Semeraro. You can hear more background to this story and Stefano's opinion on why Italian tennis is going through such a renaissance right now in our full chat on This Sporting Planet's YouTube channel. When this news broke, Ed and Todd, it obviously was quite controversial. No one was expecting it to emerge when it did as well. all the reaction I have seen pretty much is in condemnation of it, in the sense of how can there be an agreement in place? How can it just be a 3-month ban? Many like Stan Wawrinka, a 3-time major champion, now saying he doesn't believe tennis is a clean sport anymore. It just seems all very damning with regards to Sinner. I don't know what the reaction has been amongst where you guys have been.
It's a tough one, isn't it? I understand that. I can understand why people are upset. And Novak Djokovic said a majority of the players don't feel that it's fair, and it appears that you can almost affect the outcome if you are a top player, if you have access to the top lawyers, which of course Novak Djokovic also has. And of course, Djokovic is saying this in his role as part of the PTPA. But also, of course, the background is that Djokovic has lost his last 3 matches against Sinner. So he probably would have preferred if Sinner was out of the equation for a lot longer. I do feel bad for Sinner in the sense that, from what I understand at least, he had no idea this was happening. It's the fault of his masseuse, and you trust the people around you to know what they're doing. And even on the tube that Humberto Ferreira brought, there's actually a big sign that says no doping. So you would assume somebody in that role pays a little bit more attention to what he's doing and what he's putting on, the world's best tennis player at the moment. And he didn't really gain any perceived benefit from it. It's not like some of these other cases we've seen, for example, with Maria Sharapova, where one could argue that she really did get extra performance from what she did. So I can understand where he's coming from. But then on the other hand, you look at somebody like Simona Halep, who went through a similar thing, and that destroyed her career, essentially. So for Sinner to just get 3 months, have a nice bit of a holiday, and then come back at home in Italy does seem a little bit unfair.
Yeah, he does come back in time for the Rome Masters. Here's my take on this, and I'm old enough to have been around long enough time to see this happen. My question is, this is the second positive test, correct? Would it have been different if he wasn't a top player and he was ranked 92nd or 123rd? I just feel like we've seen this movie play out before, and I'd like to give him the benefit of the doubt. I don't want to go scorched earth on Jannik Sinner, but if it walks like a duck, and I mean, that's where I am, because I've seen this in athletics, track and field, obviously the Tour de France. It's just, we've seen this time and time again. Just happen to have a little prop right here. The book that I'm reading right now just kind of brings it up into full circle in Novak, Searching for Novak, the man behind the enigma. And I think that's kind of what tennis is right now. I just don't feel like I just feel like with Pete Sampras and even Federer and some of these guys, they were an open book. You kind of knew what you were getting. And I just feel like now there's a little bit more a mysterious side to tennis that I don't know if people really want to embrace yet. And this just kind of casts a shadow on it. So there you go. I've said my piece.
I mean, I think you're right, Ed, as well, to mention the PTPA, who are the Professional Tennis Players Association. They've come out, obviously, questioning the whole system and feeling as though it's broken, that it's biased, that it is unacceptable, that some players can have that financial and legal support of the very best nature, whereas others can't, and have to go through long drawn out processes, which eventually don't go in their favor. Reading, as you said, rightly so, what happened with the masseuse and the physio, and the fact that he suffers with psoriasis, so he has cuts on his back, and that's how they think perhaps that's how the sort of doping, if you like, entered into his system. There were 3 scientific experts that confirmed that was a possible explanation for the positive test. But if it's just a possible explanation, there could be another explanation. Obviously, we have to go with what has been agreed with WADA. They feel as though that was the correct that was correct in the fact that he hasn't done anything wrong and he didn't intend to cheat. But I can also understand why there are some out there who are very critical of the system, but also just wondering how you can come to a settlement. And I know this is actually part of WADA's code, and you can do this within a set period of time. You can come together and make an agreement. But if you're innocent, don't you want to fight your case until the end? I don't know. This is all subjecture, and maybe we don't want to go down it too far, but it just feels as though it is a case of you're helping out the world number 1, but you're not going to help out the world number 254.
And I'm sure this story has way more legs to it. It's going to play out more. It's going to run. And we will keep you up to date here on This Sporting Planet as more developments take place. So from fighting in the courts to fighting on the ice, I want to talk about the 2025 NHL Four Nations Face-off. And if you guys didn't hear about this or see this, it was amazing in North America. International hockey tournament in the middle of the NHL season featuring Canada, Finland, Sweden, and the USA, and temporarily placed the NHL's annual All-Star game, which we'll get more to that in a second, for 2025. So they had to come up with something to generate interest. This is all taking place on the heels of the Super Bowl and in the middle of the NBA season. So it was all the players taking part had to have NHL contracts and had to have that nationality of USA, Canada, Sweden, or Finland. Now, Canada emerged victorious, I'm sorry to say, in overtime as Connor McDavid goals. He seals it in overtime 3-2 to win it in Boston. And this was after the USA beat Canada in our early round play in Montreal. So it was just amazing. It's the run up to the final. The lowest price tickets I'm hearing were around $1,000 on a lot of resale places. Not quite Super Bowl levels, but really captured the imagination of the fans. And the final, get this, guys, was watched by over 16 million fans in North America. Now, that is the second most watched hockey game of the past decade behind Game 7 of the 2024 Stanley Cup Final, and was the most viewed non-NFL game ever on ESPN Plus, the streaming site. So by any standards, it has been a huge success for the NHL. And one person who probably is quite happy is Steve Mayer. He is the NHL's president for content and events, and I had the chance to chat with him and recount what took place and the future of the format.
We knew that we're going to go to the Olympics again, and in 2026 we'll participate after a long hiatus from the Olympics. Right. And so what we all wanted to do was get our players acclimated again to international play. We hadn't also participated in an international event since 2016, the World Cup of Hockey. So, I think the generation of the idea sort of was hatched based on we should do something before the Olympics. And then, given the politics of the world and given some of the teams that we thought, couldn't be in this event, we said, let's just do something a little bit smaller. And that's where we came up with the concept of Four Nations. No individual was responsible for the idea. It really was a combination between the NHL and the NHLPA. When we work on these international events, we work on those together. And then, my memory is so foggy as to who came up with the name, and a lot of the rules were a combination of a lot of folks. It was really a team effort. And it's kind of fitting because, in hockey, that's all we talk about is team over individual. But in this one, it truly was, and then we watched how it just took off. Like, I think we realized a few weeks out that the players were going to be really into this.
Yeah.
Like, this was a big event for the players. And that kind of got us all psyched to know that, like, we might have something here. And obviously we did have something here.
Steve, I want to get to momentum because right now the NHL is like the it girl that just came to the high school and everyone wants to date her because you have the momentum coming off the Four Nations. You've got celebrities like Charles Barkley that can't get enough hockey that are singing the praises. You guys have the big event in Columbus, Ohio, the outdoor event at Buckeye Stadium, 80,000 people. And then as you look forward, I know you're always planning ahead, the Olympics in less than a year, and then you have the World Championships, a year or two after that. So I just think, personally, I'll be covering snowboarding at the Olympics next year, but I wonder if hockey is going to be the most watched thing at the Olympics come February.
Yeah, I think our friends at the Olympic Games are pretty happy because what this no question did was set up what will be one amazing Olympic event. And I think our players are just going to be counting down the days to the Olympics because, everything that happened, and I know it was only 4 teams, but It did set the table really well. I mean, if we get another USA-Canada game in the Olympics, you think the television ratings were impressive this year? Just wait. it would be incredible.
Talk about John Cooper, the head coach of Canada, in some of his comments about this is the greatest thing that's happened to hockey in a decade. And during those early fights with the Kachucks, he goes, I wasn't even watching the ice. I was looking at the fans' reaction. Is he speaking in hyperbole, or was he pretty much spot on?
Yeah, no. What I love about him and what makes him also a great coach is just he speaks his mind. He is as raw and honest as it gets. And you mentioned PK Subban being an incredible spokesperson for the NHL. John Cooper is just that. You know, he's quite the coach, but he's also somebody who gets it and who wants the league to grow. Like who will get out there and put himself out there. And we love him. And believe me, I saw his comments and I talked to him throughout the entire tournament. You know, he'll make a suggestion or two that are really amazing. And so, you know, he's great for our sport, and he's really a good guy. So, you know, and it was so many more people, like everybody said the right things because it felt right. You know, it felt good. And, you know, the whole way through, no one knew who was going to win in the end. And let's face it, we went to overtime, and the United States had many chances to win in that overtime.
Jordan Bennington, MVP. I don't know how he stopped some of those Austin Matthews shots.
Yeah, so it could have been any result. You know, it really could. And the first game of the tournament, Canada beat Sweden in overtime. If Sweden beats Canada, it could have been a whole different tournament. You know, listen, in any sport, you never know. That's why they play the game. That's why we all love sports so much. It just worked out so well along the way. A lot of, as I said, factors that led to the success. But we'll take it. I'm not going to argue with it. We'll take it.
And as always, you can hear my full chat with Steve on our YouTube channel. Just search for This Sporting Planet. All right. So Edward in Singapore, Natalie in London. What did you guys make of the spectacle on ice?
Right. I'm going to be brutally honest. This was so off the radar over here. Didn't even know it was happening. The only thing I then found out about was the fight. That went everywhere on social media, and that was quite entertaining. But the rest of it, I honestly, I just didn't even hit our shelves over here in the UK.
Same here. I watched the fight, which was right at the start of the highlights package. It is the most bizarre thing I've ever seen, Todd. I mean, just explain this to us. Normally in football, when a fight breaks out, somebody jumps in there, the referee, they break it up immediately, and it ends. From what I understood, the referees just let the two guys go at it. And in fact, everyone else cleared some space so they could have the space to fight. This is just what happens in hockey, isn't it?
It's what happens in hockey. Now, this can't happen in the Olympics. And that, you know, I'm talking with Steve about how the Olympics are coming up in less than a year's time in Italy and how this might be the most viewed thing. You know, once the gloves go off, and this is what's the interesting thing, a lot of times in NHL games, in highlights, some of the players are mic'd up. And so they'll basically agree to this before. They're like, hey, you want to go? Yeah, I want to go. I want a piece of you. Yeah. Once the gloves come to the ground, and you obviously have to lose the stick. You can't, you know, swing the stick or you're gone for a long time. It's on. And I think this is just an old code. This is a hockey code of just how it is done. You had a problem with me. I got a problem with you. Let's just settle it right here and now. And it's a little barbaric, and I feel like it's a bit antiquated. Like we need to get past this because it gets a little bit thuggish. But it is so ingrained in the culture that I don't see it going anywhere in the near future. If you do this, like I said, in the Olympics, verboten, it is not a good thing, and your team will not be happy about it. But yeah, the Kachuk brothers started this thing off, and they said they basically wanted to set a tone. And I just think the way it played out, as I spoke with Steve, that the Americans won on Canadian ice amidst all the political things with the tariffs and all that. And then the Canadians win it in overtime with probably the best player in the world right now, Connor McDavid, in overtime. You just can't write this kind of drama. It was fantastic. So I want both of you, before we get to Italy, Milan Cortina Olympics in less than a year's time, you guys brush up on your hockey, because I really think the hockey tournament with the pros coming back for the Olympics is going to be a huge deal.
Couple of quick questions, Todd, on that. First of all, is it theater? Do these guys really want to fight, or are they doing it because it gets them in the headlines, it gets them on the highlights reel? And secondly, do you think that the NHL and hockey players like the fact that they are mostly known for fighting, and that most people like myself and Natalie would have seen the fight and probably not the rest of the match, where I'm sure there was a lot of skillful playing?
Yeah, no, good questions by you, Edward. I think no, it is not theater. All you have to do is look at some of these guys and they're missing teeth, and there's guys on each team that are known as thugs or they're the fighters. So you take a shot at our best player, whether it's Connor McDavid or whoever, and our thug's going to probably go after you. If you cheap shot him, he's going to go after you. And so a lot of this is not theater in the sense of these are things that have been brewing for a while. These are either comments or things they've read about each other. And so rather than do it on a tweet, as Taylor Swift would say, it's a cop-out. They just throw the gloves down and say, let's go. And they settle it right there. And if you ever get a chance to hear the microphones, if players are mic'd up, they go at it and it is all on for 30, 60 seconds. Once they hit the ice, though, the refs converge on it, separate them. They skate away. They go do their 2-3 minutes of penalty time. But you'll hear them in there and they'll scrap it and they'll go, you done? Yeah, I'm good. You good? Yeah, good fight. And they'll separate them like, this is craziness. But it's how it is. Like I said, it's part of the culture of hockey. And I tell you what, and I'm not advocating violence, but I would like to see maybe a little more of that heart in NBA players. I mean, PK Subban said it the best. In hockey, you play hurt or you play injured. Are you hurt or are you injured? Well, you play through hurt, not injured. NBA right now, you split a nail. I better sit out a couple days. I'm getting paid $42 million, but I better sit out a few days. So there you go. That's the end of my speech.
All right, time is rapidly running away from us. But before we go, you know what time it is. It's time for any other business.
Yeah, that's right. In the men's Six Nations, that's where we're going to start. Ireland have won the Triple Crown, having beaten England, Scotland, and most recently Wales. They are the only team able to win the Grand Slam now and are favourites for our sporting word of 2025, the three-peat, which has never been done before in the Six Nations. France, by the way, they got back onto the winning trail, thumping Italy 73-24, and it's between them and England for the runners-up spot, although both actually could still win the Six Nations outright. France versus Ireland is the potential decider in Dublin in March, and we'll bring you more on that in later episodes. Just some news with regards to the European Solheim Cup, who have their new captain. It is Anna Nordqvist. The Swedish golfer has played in 9 consecutive Solheim Cups and will be looking to lead her team to victory in 2026 in the Netherlands after the US won the last edition. And finally, a lot has been happening, by the way, over here. The new F1 season officially was launched at the O2 Arena in London with all 20 drivers in attendance at a first-of-its-kind, lavish, as you can imagine, show, which involved dancers, live music, and 15,000 fans in attendance too. It was really bizarre to see Lewis Hamilton in the red of Ferrari, but that's something we're going to have to get used to. And we'll be talking more about the new F1 season in our next episode.
Well, my A.O.B. surprisingly surrounds rugby. The Rugby League is heading to Las Vegas in a big way this weekend with teams from England, Australia. They are heading to Allegiant Stadium to take part in an epic 4-game extravaganza. And these are some of my favorite teams. Listen to this. The Canberra Raiders taking on the New Zealand Warriors. You've got Penrith Panthers taking on Cronulla Sutherland Sharks. You've got the Wigan Warriors taking on the Warrington Wolves. And, of course, the Australian Gillaroos taking on England's women team in an international match. So that'll be fantastic. And then we spoke about the World Alpine Skiing Championships, focusing on the women's last week, and discussed Michaela Schifrin, her attempt to win gold 3 months after that bruising crash that resulted in a punctured abdomen and left her traumatized. Well, she won gold in the combined event alongside her teammate Breezy Johnson, who won the downhill title. Inspired by that, Michaela made history on Sunday, and I watched this. This was amazing. Sealed her legacy as one of skiing's greatest, becoming the first athlete in alpine skiing to win, get this, 100 World Cup races. And of course, Alex Ovechkin. I mean, guys, he broke his leg and he came back 5 weeks later, and now he looks destined to beat Wayne Gretzky's NHL goal record this season. Could happen this season. He's currently on 882 with Gretzky's total currently 894. My money's on Ovechkin.
Watch this space. And finally, a bit of mystery from me in the AFC Champions League. Now, Wednesday, February 19th, just a couple of hours before they were due to finish their Champions League stage campaign against Ulsan Hyundai, Chinese Super League team Shandong Taishan were deemed to have withdrawn from the tournament. Now, a statement did come out from the 4-time Chinese Super League winners, and it said due to serious physical discomfort of some of the players and after evaluation by the medical team, the players were unable to form a team to participate in their group stage match against Ulsan, and because of that, they have deemed to have withdrawn from the tournament. However, sources on the ground say that whatever this physical discomfort was clearly didn't hamper them the day before when they carried out their pre-match activities in Ulsan. They went through all their press conferences, they did their training the night before, no issues whatsoever. So it's understandably led to some theories during the rounds on social media. Now, one such theory claims The withdrawal is related to Shandong's previous game. They were up against another South Korean side in Gwangju FC, and Chinese fans present at the stadium apparently brandished posters of certain individuals, including North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, which, as you would expect, did not go down too well with the South Korean fans. And in retaliation, apparently, the South Korean fans were planning to humiliate the Chinese team by displaying signs referencing the Tiananmen massacre. So in order for the Chinese team to avoid any negative press surrounding themselves and the Chinese government, it was decided that it was better to withdraw from the tournament altogether. Now, we don't know for certain. What we do know, though, is that it's created a big headache in terms of the standings. Basically, 12 teams in the standings, 24 clubs split between the East and the West zone. Each club only plays 8 games. But if all of Shandong's games are voided, it means that 3 teams have played 8 games, 3 teams have played 7 games, and then where do we go from here? And then, of course, it's the question of the clubs that lost to Shandong saying, hey, wait a minute, we lost against a team that was eliminated. Surely we should reverse that loss because they're not in the tournament anymore. So the AFC says that they are going to have a meeting and come to an appropriate decision. But watch this space. Who knows what's going to happen?
I mean, that is a cracking story. Just goes to show sport never disappoints. Thanks so much for listening to this podcast and being part of this Sporting Planets tribe. Make sure to subscribe to the show via your favourite podcast provider and on YouTube as well, so you never miss an episode. And please do leave us a review as well.
And if you do leave a review, be kind. We'll be back next week looking ahead, talking more about the men's Six Nations and preview the women's Six Nations. Plus, we'll find out who to watch out for during March Madness in America. That's coming up. And it's a start, as Natalie pointed out, a brand new Formula One season.
Oh yeah, cannot wait. So that episode will be released on Wednesday, the 5th of March. But before then, check out everything on our social channels to get your sporting fix. Until then, from Natalie, Todd, and myself, and the whole of the This Sporting Planet team, thanks for listening.